Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Mitton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. Kim Wright is the founder of Wright Strategies and a seasoned political strategist with over 30 years of experience in Canadian politics. In this timely episode of Women Don't Do That, recorded during a federal election, we explore why women's engagement in politics matters, how you can get involved, and what keeps women on the sidelines. From grassroots activism to leadership, this conversation will leave you feeling empowered to step into the political space, no matter what your starting point.
All right.
Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me.
It's so exciting to have you here.
This is, we're in, I'd like some precedented times, but, sometimes unprecedented times brings people together like you and I. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you work in and around politics because nothing ever really surprises you in some ways, right? But right now it's beyond that. We're in a whole different realm.
Yeah, it's there's no question about that. My therapist years ago said, "Why is it you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop?" And I'm like, "I've worked in politics since I was 13. I've made a career out of the other shoe dropping and being prepared for it." So, but it's weird times for sure, frightening
Yeah,
times in fact.
right. As we get to know you more, can we start off by talking about what does life look like for you right now?
Well, my day job, I run Canada's largest and foremost municipal affairs government relations agency. So when people say you can't fight City Hall, it's literally my job every day. So I get really excited about the projects I get to work on in that. I live in downtown Toronto. I grew up in rural southern Ontario, so my rural side comes out quite a bit as much as I live downtown Toronto, and my whole life I've been a fierce Toronto Blue Jays fan, so through thick and thin. So longtime New Democrat. My first campaign was 1990. I was that kid who just fell in love with politics. My father didn't ever cast a electoral ballot, although I did get him once to vote in an all-star game balloting. So I feel like I did my as much as I could with what we had.
Wow, that's great. I can definitely identify with the rural aspect. I don't know if you and I talked about that before, but I grew up outside of Ottawa in a rural community too, so that's something else that we have in common as well. Not just politics, working in politics. Can you share what motivates you to live your best life?
Oh, I was talking about this with some friends this morning. In large part because I spent some, we all have a moment of, something catastrophic happens.
Mhm.
Uh, and and well, I have always tried to live a good life, a fun life, a caring life. I had a moment about 7 or so years ago, 8 years ago now, where my mom had passed away,
Mm.
and my father was not doing well either, was about to pass away, and
Mm.
my first marriage broke down, and I decided in that moment to stop living for everyone else. And, you have those moments of those, almost Grey's Anatomy-esque on the floor, devastated. And then you're just like, all right, I could do this forever. That doesn't seem fun. Or I can figure out who it is I want to be authentically, how I want to show up for my friends, my family, but most importantly, how do I want to show up for myself? Because being perfect was putting a strain on my health and well-being.
Mm.
So I ended up, after many years of working for other people, started my own firm called Wright Strategies because I love a good pun and I love a bad pun even more. And it started that. Had you had asked me if entrepreneurship was part of my life goals, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Wasn't a thing. Figured out who I was authentically, what I loved, what I didn't love, what I wanted to be better at, and how do I want to show up for people, not only in my career but in my dealings with folks.
Mm.
How do I show up for those coming up behind me in politics and in business? How do I support other founders in public affairs? We'll talk about that in a little bit, I'm sure. um, how do you show up for the person that you wish showed up for you,
Mm.
in the before times, right?
Yes.
And so really took that leap of faith. I was like, well, worst case scenario, I've got another job offer. I'll go do that. But that was 6 years ago, and Right Strategies has never looked back. And
Mhm.
I love my fantastic, fabulous, weird, chaotic, wonderful life.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an amazing story, and you've really been through a lot. A piece that resonated with me in particular was about how you didn't always necessarily see yourself as an entrepreneur, and I think that's an important message for a lot of listeners because I think people often think there's this grand plan and everything is super clear and you know exactly what you're going to do and then you just do it and it never really happens that way.
No.
And I think, you know, if people have been listening to the podcast long enough, they have probably heard that story over and over again, because it's true. It's just not how it works. The other piece that really stood out to me is the giving back piece, which is part of the work that I do with Next Gen and the event that I do every year about professional development in public affairs. Because, like you, I wished that some of those things existed, and maybe that also comes from both of our rural backgrounds. I grew up in a rural part of a riding, and the riding association was an hour away. I grew up in a family where my parents didn't even tell each other who to vote for or who they voted for. And when I moved to Ottawa, I knew nothing about politics. Like the way I got engaged was really curiosity. I knew one person from home who had been working in politics in Ottawa. And I wish I had have had access to people like me. And I know because of the work that you do that you really do give back to others and offer your time. And it's like part of your value.
Yeah. It is part of my value and part of my values, right? Like,
Mhm.
not to steal Mark Kearney's book, which I will not bore everyone with, I, but you do have to do that. I have been so lucky that a lot of people over the course of my life have shown me their little tricks, their little tips, their different way of doing things. That curiosity you talked about is so important. And
Mhm.
and I don't care what people's academic or
Mhm.
professional background is.
Yeah.
You can have 17 letters after your name. Great, bless. But if you do not have a curiosity of why things are the way they are, how we can make them better, how did we get here? Why is that there? I
Mm.
often say in Toronto City Council, what is buried on page 57 of an 82-page report? Because
Right.
that's where the heart of things are. And then you can figure out, how do you change things? How do you move things? Because otherwise, if you're just being mad about it, you can go scream on the internet, and that's fine. But do you want to change things? Or, my husband's favorite phrase is, do you want to be mad? Do you want to be right? Or do you want to do something about it?
I love
Like,
that.
and so very much in those ways is, how do you do something about it?
Yeah.
For the political nerds who are listening, and I hope there are lots, because shout out to all of you. My favorite pro tip to give people was from Nick Kouvalis, who's a pollster and troll par excellence on the internet. But Nick's advice to me once when I was collaborating with him was, every ad you do, watch it on mute.
Mm.
Because if you can't tell the story, if you're worrying about voiceovers and whatever, if that story can't be told on mute because everybody watches it in a food court, in a bar, or whatever, or scrolling through social media, then the ad doesn't work.
Mm.
And so I took that advice in the last Ontario provincial election, working with some of the ad team on Marit Stiles' campaign. I'm like, okay, now watch it on mute. Do you know what we're talking about? Or does this just look like a whatever? And they're like, oh, okay, different way of doing that. So just those small teachable things.
Yeah.
And some of it's hard fought knowledge of screwing up,
Learning the hard way.
learning the hard way. And some of it is, just listening around and being curious
Yeah.
of how can we make things a little bit better.
I love that. I think that aspect of staying curious, lifelong learning, doing things differently will serve everybody well in their career and their personal lives. So it's good for people, even who may not be political geeks who are joining in. We're of course in Canada right now in an election, and for those of us who work in politics, it's an exhilarating time and also exhausting at the same time. It's kind of both of those things. And, lots of Canadians aren't paying as much attention to it as we are. And one of the things I thought would be fun today was talk more about the election, why getting women engaged, why it matters, and how they can get involved. I feel like a lot of women often feel intimidated and don't know where to start. Thought it would be interesting to first maybe talk about why this election, and you're probably going to laugh when I say this, is so consequential, Kim.
Well, it is. And
Mm,
people kind of roll their eyes, and that's why you thought I was going to laugh about the question of, because we always hear this is the most important election of our time. And it is.
it is.
And every election kind of feels that way because
Yeah.
changing governments are a big deal.
Hmm.
How people come at things. And I may disagree with other parties and how they want to get to places. Heck, I disagree with people in my own party sometimes about how they want to do certain things. But understanding that campaigns actually do matter.
Hmm.
How you want to have your community is about politics. I talk about if I can see it, smell it, touch it, feel it, or experience it, some government, some place is regulating it.
Right.
So if you want to have those experience, if you want to have clean air, you want to be able to get your kid into childcare or fix the approval processes or whatever it happens to be, or making sure you have access to healthcare that isn't going to cost you an arm and a leg like
Yeah.
my family in the US does. Those are important things that come as part of campaigns. This is even more important when we look at what's happening around the world. And it is exhausting. You're right. You scroll through any social media, you turn on the news, you're like, nope, I'm going to go back to my Taylor Swift Eras Tour playlist and not deal with this.
Yeah.
But even Taylor Swift realized there's too much happening in the world to sit on the sidelines.
Mm,
And you don't have to be able to run an entire campaign. You can start small. No candidate is going to be perfect. No human being is perfect.
right.
But there are some people that resonate with your values more than others do.
Hmm.
And that's start with those things. Start with who's kind of a rad person to be around or not, or who speaks to your values.
Hmm.
And those involvements make a big difference. And
Hmm.
and it doesn't have to be you're diving in with, knees, elbows, toes, fully into the deep end of a campaign, although cool if you have that skill set. But it's the people you make, it's the changes you can help impact, and the questions that good campaigns ask the people around. Why are you coming in? What's motivating you? What moves you? what what makes you interested in X issue?
Right.
You'll start to find that the more that you talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, and campaigns,
Hmm.
some of those ideas start to get reflected in campaign policy. And it always baffles me the first time, the second time, and the whatever time I'm at now. But when you add those different voices in, it matters.
Hmm.
There's a cliched term of add women, change politics, and change the
Yes.
conversation. Like, you think about it from the medical community. You have more women doctors who don't have the same symptoms as men,
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, how are these things being dealt with is totally different now
Yeah.
than what they would have been if it
Yeah.
was just a bunch of people that don't have our body types and our situations.
Yeah.
And so those do matter. And it's
Hmm.
scary. Anytime you walk into a different room is terrifying.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, some of those campaigns and some of the people I have met in those conversations have become some of my best friends for the last 20, 30 plus years.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's very true. Let's back it up for a second from the perspective that let's somebody's new to politics, doesn't
Yep.
really know much, maybe
Yep.
doesn't remember their civics class. So we're talking about when we talk about
There are
Canadian
some
political
elected
parties.
officials who don't remember their civics classes,
Oh
so
my gosh.
you're not in rare company on that.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're listening, it's okay. Um, and Canadian politics tends to kind of be on a continuum, right, between the different parties and kind of where they sit. If someone doesn't know much about politics and kind of said like, what, where do the main political parties fit within that spectrum, and what does that mean to a voter? What would you say to them?
There are a lot of things where you can just like answer a bunch of questions. It'll tell you where your starting place is.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that if you are a conservative, you tend to care about uh, diminishing tax rates more than you care about outcomes for Canadians because the market will take care of it.
Mm.
Again, these are gross generalizations, so bear with me. Um, if you're a new Democrat, you tend to look at how can we help? How can we help Canadians? How can we help our communities? How can we help? The Liberals tend to be somewhere in between, and depending who the leader is, they either swing more wildly one way or another, or the joke we often hear in politics is that the Liberals will campaign like New Democrats and govern like conservatives, unless there's a happy minority government that pushes them to get dental care and pharmacare. Shout out to Jagmeet Singh on that one.
Yeah.
Sorry for listeners who didn't get it in my introduction. I am Team Orange, although I am friends with everybody. Um, but it's that's kind of your general. Uh, you could talk about PPCs or who are more to the right of the conservatives, and the Green Party who like the environment, but under Elizabeth May are also very much on the conservative spectrum.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
in fact, have more pro-life candidates often than even the conservatives do running. So they are not to the left of the New Democrats. That is a fallacy that's out there in the world.
Hmm.
And then there's all sorts of other parties. There's dozens of other parties, but those are kind of your main ones. And then you have the Bloc Québécois. If you're listening in Quebec, they tend to be much more. Well, their whole reason for being is to separate from Canada, which not really a message box that's working for them right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, that's it, it's just it's a whole different ballgame in the last 6 weeks than 6, 7 weeks than it was, a year ago or 6 months ago. So that's kind of your basic overview of the
Hmm.
political landscape.
Yeah, yeah, it gives a little bit of a picture. And then I would say, basically any topic that you're passionate about, let's say your issue is childcare or your issue is fiscal spending. Like you can go
Mhm.
across each of the parties and research what each of them thinks about it. Um,
And they all have a different perspective on different things.
yeah,
We've seen in this campaign so far that every party has some version of tax cuts. So
yes.
are they targeted tax cuts to do a certain thing? Are they targeted or are they across the board?
Hmm.
Does that matter? What will they do with other programs like the dental care program, which has helped 3.5 million Canadians
Yeah.
receive dental care, which also, if you're a fiscal hawk, it also means that those people aren't going to the emergency room to deal with their teeth. So there are things that matter about that. If you're looking at housing policies, if everyone's got a different way in which they approach it. The
Hmm.
curiosity part comes into the as of the why.
Right.
Oftentimes people get involved in campaigns because they know the candidate.
Mhm.
And that's a perfectly respectable way to get into it. And it's in fact how a lot of people, sometimes it's an issue that's motivated them. Other times it's the candidate themselves.
Mhm.
Both of those work. It's intensely personal why you finally decide you're going to get involved in politics beyond the simple act of voting.
Yeah.
And given the voter turnout numbers, I don't overlook the simple act of voting because a lot of people are like, my vote doesn't matter.
Right.
And I will tell listeners out there in the recent Ontario election, there was a fellow who in Northern Ontario who won on election night by 4 votes.
Mhm.
It went up to 9 come the recount, but 4 votes. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And so whenever somebody says to me their vote doesn't matter, well, there were 5 people in that riding whose vote mattered.
Yeah.
And do you want think about the people around you. Think about your people in your kids' class or your commute to the office or even the office itself. Look around those people. Those are voters. Do
Yeah.
you want them making the decision for you? If
Mhm.
not,
Yeah.
go vote.
Yeah. That's one of the things I wanted to unpack with you is like there's many different ways beyond just really diving in the election, how you can participate in the election. So we've already talked about voting. You
Yeah.
can go and participate in a campaign. When you're in a campaign, there's like big roles, right? You're leading the communications, or you're doing those kinds of things. But there's also lots of volunteer roles where you're helping with things once in a while versus all the time. You can help door knock. So, what are some of the different ways that people can get engaged? Like another one that comes to mind for me is maybe donating money. Maybe you don't have time, but you have money. So, walk us through some of the different ways that people can engage.
Yeah, and really it comes to, and every campaign will say, I'll take whatever you got. However much
Yeah,
you've got 10 minutes, I'll take your 10 minutes. You've got, the max donation, I'll take that. You get $10, we'll take that too.
yeah,
So all of it actually does matter and it all adds up. So it can be as low voter engagement as putting up signs or dropping off literature in your neighborhood. Like you just go to each door and put the flyers in their door. I will say all of these things I have done on campaigns.
mhm,
There's 2 roles I've not done on a campaign. I have never been a candidate, and I love all of my candidates dearly. I couldn't do what you do, or at least not yet. And I've never been the CFO.
mm.
But every other job I'm about to
I will
uh,
never be the CFO. I'll tell you
yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm more apt to be a candidate than I will be to be the CFO.
Yes. I
They
was going to
handle
say
the
the candidate one is one sometimes we forget, but ladies, you could definitely be the candidate.
look, absolutely. And there's a stat that says you have to ask women 7 times before they see themselves in that role, where
Yeah.
men are like, of course, bro, I'm in,
Yeah.
whether they should be or not.
Yeah.
So I will say, like, I say that because there are extraordinary candidates out there who it has taken years to finally convince them to be the candidate.
Mhm.
And look, there are people out there who will be mean to candidates.
Oh, yeah.
Your people are mean to communicators and pundits
Yeah.
and but first of all, turn off the comments because they don't matter.
No.
They really don't, because those like the people who hate watch CBC, if you're listening to this, please stop writing in because no one cares. Um, like I don't care if you think my makeup looks bad. I just don't. But that's not to discourage people. I think it is too easy for the mediocre to
Mm.
say, yep, when people who are extraordinary are like, well, somebody else will do it. Why not
Right.
you? Why
Yeah, why
not
not
you?
you? Yeah.
And I am all for encouraging the folks to get out there. If it takes me 10 times to ask a killer candidate to go run, I'll do it 12. Like,
Right.
let's
Yeah.
go. What do you need?
Yeah. I love that.
But
I think, Kim, it's also a reminder that not everybody that runs for politics like knows that much about it, right? Maybe they were a small business owner or like their
Yep.
expertise is somewhere else. It's not women often don't do stuff till they're like overqualified.
Right.
But you have to remember most people going into politics, yes, sometimes you have former staffers, right, that run and know how things work, but most of the time it's everyday Canadians. And your colleagues that are also running also know nothing or know very little. And then you get people around you like Kim who know what they're doing to help you.
It's called the House of Commons, right?
Mhm.
Some of the most extraordinary parliamentarian I have seen in the last, call it 15 years or so, was a woman named Ruth Ellen Broussard.
Mhm.
Ruth Ellen, if for those who are listening,
You just gave me chills.
Ruth Ellen was mocked in the 2011 campaign. She
Yeah.
came in on the Jack Layton Orange Wave. Sometimes we just have to put candidates there because, oh, you would like to be the candidate there and we need to run a full slate of candidates. Like, you're not expected to win, you're not expected to do a thing, but we need a full slate of candidates and you like politics and you're good with people. So great, cool.
Yeah.
She, in fact, had plans that were booked during that campaign. And she's like, it was my birthday. I was going away, doing a thing. Media made a whole stink about it. It called
Yeah.
her Vegas girl,
She was
party
really
girl.
young, right?
She was
Like a
young.
student.
She was a student at Carleton. She ran the bar at Carleton's,
Mhm.
turns out she gets elected. Wonderful. She worked really hard. She learned French because it was a Quebec riding.
Yeah.
She became fluently bilingual, really worked in the community
Yeah.
and learned about politics.
Yeah.
So she didn't need to have a law degree
Yeah.
or, 17 letters after their name, but she was a person who came at it passionately,
Mhm.
curiosity, and worked really hard to understand it and became one of the best parliamentarians I have seen in the last, couple of decades.
Mm.
And so it doesn't matter what your background is. It's called the House of Commons for a reason. And I want people to be more engaged. I think that
Mm.
when people have a lived experience,
Yeah.
whatever that lived experience is, that they
Yeah.
can bring it to the decision making, it makes for better conversations. And that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily always mean the candidate, although I want more awesome candidates. But it also means the people who start to learn how to run campaigns, who organize. I mean, every woman I know is one of the most killer organizers in the world
Multitaskers,
because
organizers. Yeah.
they got their eye on the ball, but also the details.
Hmm.
And so all of those things are important. Fundraising,
Yeah.
putting on events, tour.
Those are
I,
all things that like moms that participate in kids' school activities
right.
and organize fundraisers at schools, like you can do this.
Think about like if you're putting on an event at your kid's school or in your life, organizing the bachelorette tour, whatever it happens to be. And you know that the Instagram shots need to look good. And you know that everyone's got to show up in a certain way because the vibes will be off. That's tour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you do it right, it looks fantastic. And if you do it wrong, it looks awful. Pro
Yeah.
tip, and this is, I'm going to just toss these in throughout the course of this. Never shoot a politician with an exit sign behind their head.
Mm, yeah.
Uh, it it gives the subliminal message that they're actually on the way out the door.
Hmm.
In the I saw I made fun of on social media a leader in Ontario, Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal leader, who had the word "last" behind her
Oh,
on her bus launch day. I was like, is that just tour fail or telegraphing? So these things matter, but
yeah.
like everybody listening to there knows how to make themselves and their friends look good on social.
Yeah.
That's tour.
Yeah. I
There's lots of
will,
ways to get involved.
yeah, I will say as someone who has been a candidate before in a nomination race that um like money and people's time,
Hmm.
like you just need so much of it and it really is exhausting, hard, costly, lots of criticism. It is hard to be a candidate.
100%.
And so showing up to participate, support, it can be as simple as, I know this person is interesting. I'm interested in that topic, that party is interested in that topic, and just calling the campaign office and say you want to help.
Just show up.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like, just show up. Um, yeah, that's great. So we've talked about some of the different roles within campaigns, money, voting, some of the different things that people can do. When we talk about post-election, you're in a normal election, uh, you're in a cycle where the election is done. So people can get engaged with their riding associations. They can buy memberships to different parties and get more engaged that way. Um, they can, what are some of the other things that they can do kind of in an off cycle to just engage in politics?
It's policy development, it's conversations with your neighbors. Campaigning, I mean, yes, there's the 6 weeks of the actual campaign when it gets super intense.
Hmm.
But it's the stuff in between, where
Hmm.
you can be involved in your riding associations or your community, or finding those next new candidates and taking the 7 times to ask
Mm,
them.
right.
All of those things are
Donating
important.
money. Money is helpful in any cycle or off cycle.
Donating money, but it also, showing it, there's fun stuff too, right?
Hmm.
There's the camaraderie that you develop within politics, whether it's in your own community or not, going to conventions or,
Hmm.
council
Yeah.
meetings or fundraisers
And if you
or
get involved in the riding associations and some of the actual processes and the back end of politics, that's where you get to feed into some of those policy discussions. So if there
yeah,
really are issues you want to see change, you can also meet with your MP, right, and have conversations, but being part of the grassroots as well.
yeah, and get to know people. I will always say, like, it's people want the I was saying this in another conversation, even in the last couple of days. If you're waiting for some sort of gold leafed invitation to show up on a campaign, please stop waiting. Just show up.
Yeah.
And if you've like, but I called them and they didn't call me back. You know
Call
what that
again.
means? They need more people. Just show up.
Yeah.
Talk to them at an all candidates debate. And that's the other thing. If you're not sure,
Yeah.
like, all candidates debates give you a really good sense of who somebody is when they're being scrutinized.
Right.
And boy, do you get to see whether they're snarky or snarly, or whether or not they're really kind, and how they treat their volunteers and how they treat people who with the temerity to ask them questions. Those are just really good places to show up and get a
Hmm.
flavor of who's running in your local community.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to get a candidate on your doorstep, and it doesn't happen in every election, right?
Right.
You might be away when they're there, or they just may not have the person power to get to every doorstep. But if you do get one, ask them questions.
Yeah.
Like, be actually curious,
Share the issues that you care about. Ask
and
questions.
and even if they're not your flavor of campaign, wish them well.
Hmm.
Like, there's nothing worse than, you show up on a doorstep and they're like, like, okay, but do you have issues? Like, are there things that you want us to bring to the conversation? Are there
Yeah.
things that you want, even though you're not going to vote for me, that you want us to
Hmm.
bring to the conversation,
Well,
or maybe support in a minority
yeah.
parliament?
And Kim, it does make a difference. You think about some of the policy changes that happened under the Liberals, like the reason why people started to push back more at Trudeau when he was heading out the door was because of what they were hearing at the doorstep, which was that it wasn't so much the Liberals, but it was more people didn't like Justin Trudeau and didn't want him as the leader. And then, right? So
Yep.
and some of the policies that they had on different issues changed, like we saw with the carbon tax, right? Like those kinds of things come from many people raising their voices. And so if you care about issues that are different than that candidate, tell them.
Tell them. We've had back-to-back minority parliaments. We
Hmm.
may, in fact, end up in another minority parliament.
Hmm.
That's okay. What
Yeah.
that tells to me, and look, I may not always like the end results at the end of an election campaign, but the voters are never wrong.
Right.
And for the last two elections, they have sent back-to-back minority parliaments. They're
Right.
like, no, all right, you knuckleheads, figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure out what, for the best of Canadians, you guys
Yeah.
can figure out what to get done. It's why we haven't had, why we're finally seeing movement on childcare, why we're finally seeing movement on dental care. On childcare, growing up as a kid in the early 90s, the liberal government was promising to bring childcare in then.
Yeah.
Those kids have had kids, and those kids have had kids, and some of
Yeah.
those kids have had kids,
Hmm.
and they still can't get local access to childcare.
Right.
So why is it starting to shift now?
Yeah.
Because the public pressure is there, because women in the workforce, because people have demanded it.
Hmm.
And that, yes, there are more women in politics who have children,
Right.
more men in politics who have young children who are actually engaged and like their kids,
Right.
right? It isn't, oh, I had the kid, I'm gonna smoke the cigar and, wifey, you watch it. Like, that's not the reality.
Yes.
So the conversations and the policies have shifted to reflect current day reality.
Hmm.
And so those are the things when people want to get involved, whatever your issue is, whether it is making sure that your local community's got a doctor,
Right.
get involved in those conversations.
Yeah.
Whether it is making sure that, your auntie or your uncle who lives 4 towns over, can get to them.
Hmm.
There are lots of big and small ways, and
Hmm.
some of it might be municipal. Municipal is fun
Yeah.
because there isn't official party lines.
Yes.
There are values, but they're not really official party lines unless you're listening in from Vancouver or Montreal. But um, get involved, get engaged.
Hmm.
And if you're also like, all right, well, all of these guys are morons, I can do this better. Great. Let us know.
Yeah.
Let's find you a place. Let's like, if you're, and this is how I got involved into punditry. And
Right.
punditry is when you go on television or radio or podcasts, and you defend your people. I got tired of, either not hearing a new Democrat voice,
Right.
or wanting a stronger new Democrat voice. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, I can be mad, I can be right, or I can do something about it. And so I ended up starting to do something about it. Is it
Right.
terrifying? Absolutely.
Yes.
But it's rewarding and I love doing it.
Yeah. And you
And
you
like,
start out, it starts out scary, but it's the more and more you do it, it gets easier.
it does. Although if any of you were on my social media page, there was a photo of I can be a little self-deprecating at times, but I was doing a panel the other day and I was looking intently at the other two and they were on the screen, and my call it my poker face wasn't very good. Um, so there's often the,
That's
what is
funny.
Kim thinking?
Yeah.
Oh wait, we can't say that on air.
Right, right.
Um,
It's like I can tell exactly what Kim is
there's a
thinking.
thought balloon over her head, and
Yes.
yeah, there
Oh,
are
that's
there are
funny.
there are words, but but I will also say on part of that, and this goes back to campaigning and politics in general. I have met and get to be friends with and collaborators with some of the most extraordinary people in the country,
Yeah.
and on air we will fight. We will snarl and snap and do all the things, but it's like that old cartoon where the wolf and the foxhound would fight, and then they would like clock out, and they'd be all right, cool.
Yeah.
That's exactly how we are.
Hmm.
And one of my dearest friends in the world is the editor of the Toronto Sun
Right.
media, Adrienne Batra. In fact, she was the evening officiant at our wedding, and it's because we became friends.
Right.
She walked into City Hall working for then Mayor Rob Ford, and I'm like, hi, I'm Kim. You're new here and have no idea what you're walking into. Let me help you understand.
Right.
And we became friends from them.
The fall courses of the Beacon North Mentorship Academy are here. Join us to boost your advocacy, communication, and media skills. Whether you're new to lobbying or a seasoned advocate, we've got something for everyone. Check out the schedule and secure your spot today. Link in bio for details. When you talk about different sides of the political spectrum, you and your husband are on different
We are.
sides of the political spectrum. Talk to us about that.
Yes,
'Cause, some
not
of the listeners will definitely be living this experience, so talk more about that, Tess.
yeah, I mean, look, many people in their own homes, they don't vote the way the other people in their house vote, and that's okay. Again,
Mhm,
going back to 4 votes, in that, on that election night, so your vote matters, and if the other people in your house don't show up, well, that's on them. But yeah, my husband is a lifelong conservative. Worked under the Harper government and is probably one of the best target seat guys in the country. Uh, where I've been on the happy and unhappy side of some of his handiwork on elections. But his last political job, he was the national campaign manager for Jean Charest in the conservative leadership. So I got to see some of that as well. Um, do we agree on everything? No. Are we happy each other has points of view? Yes. And can we have a real conversation about how do we actually make things better? Absolutely. And we do all the
mhm,
time.
yeah.
But it baffles everyone that
Yeah,
a
because the thing that's really interesting about it is that I guess it depends. I also come from a faith background too. And like some people's politics and obviously people's faith perspectives are like so core to their identity.
yep.
So I think that's what's very interesting about it. And so it can be very offensive sometimes. And yet it's your partner.
Yeah.
What would you share with people that are struggling in those relationships?
So I would say it's the same thing I would say about every bit of your relationship, whether it is your faith, your fidelity, your politics. If you're having a hard time in your sexual compatibility, it doesn't really matter. It starts from a creating a safe space
Mm,
to have a conversation.
mhm,
My when we were dating Chris, my husband, my whole life, everyone would be like, "You're an awful cook. You can bake. You're a fantastic baker, but you can't cook worth a darn." Turns out I can, just no one gave me the space and grace to fail.
mm,
And so our line became, well, what's the worst that happens? We order pizza.
mm,
And now, I'm like, oh, that leaf seems like a fun recipe. Let's do it. And I made crown rack of lamb one year for Christmas dinner, had never made it in my life. Pro tip on that is use a bundt pan. It keeps everything safe and secure and evenly cooks. But um, having that safety to have the conversation.
mhm,
Do we disagree? Do we loudly disagree at times? Absolutely.
right.
But we want to have the conversation. We want to have the hard conversations
Mhm,
and the honest, true conversations. Why are you feeling that way? Why are you, okay, you're reading that article. Why are you reading that article? And if you can get to a safe space to be able to have those hard conversations, the relationship is better and stronger for it.
mhm. Yeah,
And
I
and
like
if you
what
can
you
get
said
past your
there.
embarrassment of things too.
Right. I like what you said about it extends to kind of every part of the relationship, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I
Um,
I think people are too afraid to have real conversations,
mhm,
authentic conversations,
right.
vulnerable conversations.
Yeah,
And you got to push each other a little bit on it,
right.
for sure. But if you do it and you do it right, your relationship is stronger and better for it.
Mhm, mhm,
That's we yeah, I mean, look, not to be graphic, but you're like your life becomes a lot better and stronger when you can really have real conversations. And if you can't have real conversations, if you can't tell them, you can't share with each other what you're buying on Amazon or what you're reading or frankly even what porn you're watching, then what else are you hiding? Why don't
mm,
you want to share it? Open up that vulnerability.
mhm,
And is there always a risk? Sure there is. There's a risk of coming on a podcast and saying I'm a card carrying New Democrat and as orange as the day is long. Okay. But what else is she saying? What else is interesting?
mhm,
And I will always be eternally grateful for everybody I have a real conversation with.
mm,
And sometimes it starts with finding common ground.
mhm,
If you ever see me at events, I'm usually the person in like a hat, a really fabulous hat of some sort or another. I do love a good dopamine dressing. But if that's the place we start a conversation,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And we need more of people being able to talk across party lines,
Yeah.
because things are challenging for sure.
And
And
and and you will learn so much from people even
oh,
from
it's so
other
true.
parties. I
Sometimes
mean,
even change your mind. Sometimes you
change
don't. You
change your
learn
mind on
something
some
new.
things, but also the thing about this the cross-sectionality, if you will, of my friend groups, of my favorite, pick your favorite group chat, but in my case, some of my favorite group chats have all of the parties represented in them.
Hmm.
And what you end up figuring out very quickly is the experience in politics is the same across the different parties. The good,
Right.
the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you end up trading war stories, right?
Yeah.
It's like, politics is not dissimilar to picking your favorite sports team,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's the Leafs or the Sens, or in my case, the Philadelphia Flyers, because I like finesse players who can drop the gloves. Uh, and apparently I have a thing for orange. But you know, you start to just it's a team, but you can also appreciate what others do. You'll learn from each other, and the headaches in each and the joys in each are pretty fun. And you can have some really great conversations.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very true. You can have some great conversations and learn a lot for sure. All right. I want to talk about how different people choose to vote, right? Like some
Hmm.
people are like, how do I choose to vote? And there's so many different ways, from who's the leader, who's the local candidate, like
Hmm.
regardless of what party, the party, strategic voting. Am I missing any?
Strategic voting, I will just say this candidly. Strategic voting started as a marketing ploy in the early
Mm,
90s by the liberals who decided that the New Democrats kept getting in their damn way. So
right.
they created this thing called strategic voting. And they have used this marketing ploy for the last 30 some odd years,
Hmm.
and it effectively works, but it isn't actually accurate, because all of those aggregators you're all looking at, your 338s or whatever they're called,
Yeah.
this campaign
The polling.
cycle, the polling aggregators, they can never get into riding level detail. They don't understand voter efficiency of New Democrats. They are taking an entire country, often using metro voters as their base,
Right.
and can't get into the granularity of your community. So if you're looking at an aggregator and going, well, I've got to vote this way in this riding to stop the people I don't like, stop doing that. First of all, vote for who you do like.
Right.
Because when you start to vote for who you do like, you feel a lot better about
And
it.
nothing changes either,
No,
right? If,
no.
yeah,
And
if
so,
you
and this,
actually want change.
and I laugh so hard because you see these writings where it's like, oh, you need to vote the liberal candidate here because we got to stop the conservatives. The conservatives, since time immemorial, have never won in that riding. They never will win in that riding. But oh boy, you got to stop them. Like, come on, give me a damn break.
Yeah.
So it is a marketing ploy. And the pollsters, oftentimes, not all of them, there are some reputable ones out there,
There are.
but there are ones that have been bought and paid for by certain parties. They were created as people left certain parties to manipulate the aggregators. And so, like, it's an entire marketing ploy, and like, bless that they've got it done, but it's not actually accurate. So sorry to burst everybody's bubble who are like, oh, I got to do the strategic voting thing. No, you don't. It's actually you're just being marketed to. So
Kim's advice for the day.
Kim's advice for the day.
Yeah. So when
Bunch
we talk about
pants,
other
watch things
things,
on mute, and don't go to aggregators. But what makes you go vote? That's individual. Like, it can be the
Mhm.
leader. You're like, oh, I'm for that person. I want this thing. Sure, some people are motivated by I don't want those things. Most of those people don't go to vote though.
Right.
When people when people want to do something, they want to support a certain thing,
Mhm.
then they go out and vote.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's whatever pulls to you, right? If
Right.
it's the leader you're really passionate about, then that's clear, right? If it's the candidate is someone you know and you really want to support or you've met and were impressed or right? Like there's
Yeah.
different ways and there's no I guess what I would say to people too, there's no exact right way to do it. Um
And if you just want to spite the loudmouth in your office who's voting a certain way and you want to go the other way, cool. You know, look,
yeah,
all of those things. There is no right way. There's no right
mhm,
way to vote, although I've got some suggestions. But there's no one way to get involved. There's no one way to go out and do it.
yeah,
I will say though, it's really easy to go vote.
right. Super
Even
easy.
if you're and this is the wonderful thing about the Canadian federal election campaigns, and I think that all should get to this. Um, wherever if you're not going to be in your home community during the course of an election campaign, it doesn't actually matter. You can go into any returning officer in any community and vote for your home community. So as long as your ID says if you live in Vancouver but you're stuck in St. John's or which is beautiful, not stuck there, but like you happen to be there for the month, that's okay. Go to the returning office in St. John's and they will allow you to cast your
And
ballot
is the
for
returning
that.
office the same as like the place you go the night of to vote?
Not no. So the
Okay.
returning office, so every district, every riding across the country has one Elections Canada office that
Yes. Okay.
that's where they run it from. So
Okay.
you're able to go into any of those and
Right.
go cast a ballot in your identified home
Yes. Okay.
community.
I just
Uh,
learned about this the other day. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And there's also opportunities to vote early as well. So if
Absolutely, you can vote today if you want. If you're like, "Wow, I know who my candidate is. I'm absolutely obsessed with that
Mhm,
particular one. I know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm gonna be doing on election day, so I'm gonna go vote now." You can
right.
go do that. You can go to
Mhm,
that returning office in your home community or in a neighbor and where even if you're, like, on your way to work, right? Like, if you work in a different area.
mhm,
You can go vote today. There's
right.
advance polls coming up. There are mail-in ballots as well if you're going to be out of the country.
Right.
You can order a ballot online.
Right.
You can't do online voting, but you can go to the Elections Canada website. There are so many ways in which you can vote if you already know what you're doing.
Right.
I was one of those people who used to be like, I have to vote on election day because it's there's the nostalgia and the love of it. And great. And then I realized I don't know what I'm doing on election day, but I know who I'm voting for. So why don't I just do this now?
Right.
So you'll see that there's a shift to people doing advanced voting. But if you know
Right.
what you're doing, go vote now. And if you've
Yeah.
got time on election day, those candidates need your help and support going and pulling vote.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
getting people out.
and
Mhm.
that's a pretty easy way to because you're given a list of people who are already identified as supporting your team, and you just knock on their door and say, "Hi, I'm here from X campaign. What time are you going to go vote?" And it's an easy way to get involved on
Yeah,
election day.
absolutely. All right. I
But
want
go vote because it matters.
yes, it does matter. Okay. We're going I want to ask you an audience question that somebody I put out some feelers online and I have a question from the audience and I'm going to share with you. And then I want to share how people can find more information and then we'll do the
Yes,
rapid fire questions.
love it.
So this question says, something that I've wondered is whether or not we have a party or could we have a party that could be the best of both sides. I just saw someone comment that Mark Carney is not a politician but a crisis manager and sits more in the center. Is it possible to have someone be more in the middle ground?
So it depends on what your definition of middle is, because I don't see Mark Kearney as somebody who sits in the middle. I see somebody who was a banker who doesn't like sharing what his assets are. I see a guy who is jacked up.
Kim's orange
Who,
is coming out. But yeah,
uh,
you're right. The
but
whole
so
Canadian political like
so can there be some uniters? I'm sure that yes, there can be. There always will be. But what does your definition of middle look like? Well, it's like what is popular music that shifts depending. I mean, I go
right,
back to my love of music in the early 90s, that the same year that like Nirvana, Nevermind, and Guns N' Roses and Whitney Houston all came out at like the same time. So
right,
like What is popular? That's a definition. But go for the people who like you vibe check with.
Yeah, and I would say too, like I think you mentioned this earlier, Kim, but you're never going to find someone where it's a perfect fit. So you find the best fit.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you want to try and start a new party, it's always possible. It's a lot of work, but it's always possible, and
Well,
it does happen. Okay, before we move on to getting more information, I just realized I want to ask you, and maybe you can keep it quick, but tell me a behind the scenes story from campaigning that's just like a fascinating story.
oh, I have so many fascinating stories. I mean, but there's a humanity that comes with all of it. Uh the I mean, we had this tour event, and we had a very grumpy set of reporters who were mad that they had to travel all sorts of places, and they were just getting hot and tired, like children, really. Bless them. So we actually made them up a bunch of goodie bags that had not only snacks, but like little games that they could play on the tour bus, and then they started all gambling on it. So those are just fun things. Just remember there's a human side of
Mhm.
all of this.
Yes.
These people are working, 24/7 in
Mhm.
intense circumstances, in often windowless rooms. And I like to make sure I'm the person with snacks and toys for everyone to play with, because you just need a little bit of joy.
Yeah, no, it's true, bringing the humanity back into it. So, for people who are interested in learning more,
Mhm.
there are a few different podcast episodes from Women Don't Do That where I've talked to the woman who runs Equal Voice, for instance, which is about getting women more engaged in politics. I've also had on a number of politicians or staff people who have
Yeah.
supported politicians. And so you can check out those as well, including Anna Poiliev. She's been on. So that might be of interest to some people, but I've had some different ministers and stuff as well. So you can take a look at the back catalog. I've also been doing some series on my TikTok and my Instagram, and happy to answer any questions. So if somebody has a specific question that you want to know about politics, I will make a video responding to it. So feel free to join me there. And I have a newsletter at Beacon North as well. So I'll throw those in the show notes. But Kim and I are doing something exciting, which is
Yay.
launching on Friday. It's called The Weekly Beat. And it's a panel show with some of our smart friends. And it's going to be on LinkedIn. It's at 9 a.m. Eastern. And it's really about a wrap up of the week in politics, some opinions, and it's live. So we're also happy to answer some questions. You can join us there. Is anything you want to add on that, Kim?
No, but it's going to be really exciting, and expect the unexpected, like everything else in politics these days.
Yes. And if you can't join, you can always watch the replay. All right, let's jump into the rapid fire. Kim, can you share a rule you've broke that turned out to be a great decision?
Don't date conservatives. No. No, I don't know that there's a rule I've broken, because I don't believe everything has to be set in stone. Just be a good human, be curious, and don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah. Who's a woman who continually inspires you?
Oh, my dearly departed mother, who said, "Don't worry about being too young or being a woman. You're in that room, you've got opinions, make sure people know what they are."
Oh, I love that. What's one book that has significantly impacted your wisdom or perspective?
Oh, so many books. I'm obsessed with like Nora Roberts books, which are just my fun and meltdowny things. But The Last Lion, it's a book about Ted Kennedy, and the work that he did, and yes, Chappaquiddick and whatever. But the things that he did in the Senate, and to make sure that how cancer was treated differently,
Mm,
because of his lived experience with his son, had changed lives and saved lives. And
wow.
so I think that anyone who says we should have term limits, that is a book of why we shouldn't.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your advice and time with us. And hopefully, listeners feel more empowered to get engaged in this election. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and have fun with politics. It's serious business, but it's also a heck of a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at Women Don't Do That and visit our website www.womendon'tdothat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women Don't Do That, Stephanie Mitton, or affiliated brands.